Hello, beautiful people. This is Freedom Fighter. Thank you for tuning into our channel, Goldilocks Global Banking News. Everybody knows that Goldilocks is the number one source for the RVGCR. People from around the world tune in to see what Goldilocks is sharing on the RVGCR. Don't miss your chance and get your latest updates every day. So like, share, and subscribe to this channel to get your daily podcast from the Goldilocks articles on the RVGCR. Brought to you by Freedom Fighter. Hello, beautiful people. This is Freedom Fighter, and welcome to Goldilocks Global Banking News. I am your host, you beautiful, amazing folks. What Goldilocks is sharing and showing today is, I know that many of you are most likely aware that the Federal Reserve and the chairman of the Federal Reserve, Powell, is being investigated by the federal authorities. This is directly connected to the weakening of the US dollar. Why is this so important to the RV? Let's jump right into what Goldilocks is sharing today. First, I'm going to read something to remind you that President Trump and his administration, in many of the financial decisions that he is making, not just in the U.S. but globally, is either directly or indirectly, so directly or indirectly connected to the RVGCR. Yes, the revaluation of currencies around the world. Many of you are not aware that it's already begun because countries, as we have announced on the last Saturday Night Dialogues call, many countries have already announced that they are going to float their currencies, which is multiple revaluations of one currency or another. But I'm going to continue this. The Trump administration article that we continue to read and show you, put it out there, that it was leaked, but it was provided to the Goldilocks team for us exclusively. The article states, and this was from 2024 April, stating that the RV, the current states in writing, quote, the currency revaluation is likely to be a priority of some members of the second Trump administration, large in part due to the overvalued dollar and the trade deficit. Folks, this is where currencies move, is on the water through trade. And the article states, the leak from the Trump administration states, but weakening the dollar could have far-reaching approaches, folks. So the weakening of the dollar is connected to the strengthening of the bolivar, the dong, the dinar. See, folks, the US dollar has been the strongest currency in the world for over 50 years. It's been the currency that many countries have used. For example, Iraq, large in part, used the U.S. dollar in trade, not the dinar. Vietnam, large in part, used the dong in trade, billions daily, just like Iraq, and not the dong. Venezuela, the dollar, used in trade, billions daily, not the bolivar, so forth and so forth and so forth and so on. You name the country, they used the dollar instead of their own currencies. By not utilizing their own currencies is because there was no demand for their currencies in the open market. As Forex shows, as the IMF shows, the rates of a currency move from supply and demand. So where the demand of the dollar was so high, that's why it was strong for so long. Now it's getting weaker, and currencies, foreign currencies, are beginning to move and getting stronger. So, with the Fed situation, this is all connected. What Goldilocks shares is that if the investigation escalates or signals sustained pressure on the Fed, especially ahead of Powell's term ending in May, it could amplify downward pressure on the dollar throughout the year, meaning it will continue to weaken the dollar. Folks, you should be applauding, standing, and an ovation as the dollar gets weaker, because that's a connection to the currencies getting stronger. Because these countries will stop depending on and stop using the US dollar because it's getting weak, and they will now have to rely on their own currencies. So what happens to the demand for their currencies? Their demand goes up. So what happens to the rates when the demands go up? The rates go up. Forecasts, Goldilocks is showing, already point to a gradual US dollar getting weaker, especially due to rate cuts. That's right, the Fed rate cuts and global factors. In this episode, with this recent tension with the Fed and the Federal Reserve, now leads to risk to the US dollar. Yes, Goldilocks is stating there has been short-term negative effects on the dollar, weaker versus major currencies, which is also boosting alternatives like gold. What are all these countries around the world stacking to back their currencies? Gold. But the scale remains limited so far as markets digest the news. Goldilocks is stating, watch for further developments in the coming days, particularly as the U.S. markets open. Then Goldilocks shares about the de-dollarization, whereas the BRICS nations, large in part, dumping the U.S. dollars. Remember, folks, the BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, the UAE, and Indonesia, and others. These are the BRICS nations. They are dumping the U.S. dollar like a hot potato. They are focusing on their own currencies and a potential BRICS currency. Nonetheless, it doesn't matter if it's a BRICS currency or any other country's currency. It's weakening the dollar, which strengthens the bolivar, the dong, the dinar, and every other currency that many of us hold that we are looking to go up in value. Because the demand for these currencies will begin to go up as the demand for the US dollar goes down as the dollar gets weaker. See, there are key developments right now that are underway. One of the key developments that Goldilocks is sharing is the decentralized payment systems coming out of BRICS, where they are linking national networks to BRICS countries, enabling direct settlements in local currencies, meaning Iraq, Vietnam, Venezuela, Cuba, Argentina, Mexico, you name it. They'll have a direct link to the BRICS, but they will settle in their own currencies. Settle meaning, folks, settle their trades, billions daily, in their own currencies instead of the US dollar. See, just like we shared with you how the rate change for Iraq changed their they officially announced the change in the dinar to 1,300. These are all processes that Goldilocks has been sharing. Unfortunately, many people didn't want to hear it. The preference was to hear the loudest and the sexiest. But ladies and gentlemen, just because something appears, sounds so good, doesn't mean that it's good for you. Doesn't mean that it's true. What Goldilocks has been sharing may not sound good, but you know what? It's like that high school kid, young man, who has a crush on a very attractive girl in school, one of his classmates. She's very popular. All the guys want her. All the girls want to look like her. And then there's the, cute one that's not as so voluptuous. It's the cute one. Not everyone are chasing her. But come to find out, she's the one that has the most stability. She's the one that has really the most depth and strength about her. That's Goldilocks. Depth, strength, stability of truth. That's the one that will provide you the truth, which is the inevitable sustainability of long-term growth and development. What Goldilocks has been sharing, along with Wiley and myself, is nothing but the truth. And there are those who've been following that now are completely set and prepared for the RV with professionals, licensed banking professionals, although what we shared wasn't sexy. But it was the truth. So here we have more truth that we are bringing you directly from the sources. What is happening with the BRICS? What's happening with Russia, China, Brazil, even Iraq, Vietnam, and these other countries that we have currencies for? They are dumping the funky monkey US dollar for their own currencies so that their own currencies will begin to move up in value. Yes, if you don't know what that means their currencies are getting stronger by ditching the US dollar. What Goldilocks is sharing is that overall, under the leadership right now in the BRICS, they are expanding AI and digital governance. And for local currencies, meaning countries around the world, they are encouraging them to continue to use their own currencies and ditch the US dollar. This is, folks, if you think about it, currency revaluation is likely to be a priority of the second Trump administration, large in part to the overvalued dollar. But weakening the dollar is the priority. This is where countries, it's the cause and effect. Cause is the weakening of the dollar. The effect, strengthening of the currencies that many of us hold. Yes, I know this is not what is sexy, but this is the consistent truth that will benefit you in being prepared for your blessing. Iraq plays a pivotal role in all of this, just like every other country, because Iraq has been doing something that many of these countries around the world have been doing, and that is stockpiling gold. Right now, the BRICS nations hold over 6,000 tons of gold. Iraq is the number 30th country in the world in gold reserves, all to provide strength behind the dinar. The global gold reserves is over 36,000 tons, which account for $4 trillion in gold. The U.S. Treasury is the world's largest reserve holder of gold. They have to be, because that dollar is getting weaker. Folks, what Goldilocks is sharing is that gold, silver, and other commodities and units are no longer determined by the movement of the dollar. History is now changing course. And what this does, it creates a very interesting scenario for the currencies around the world. At this point, it's like leaving the nest. When a mama bird, it takes usually a week or so when they're ready to kick a baby bird out of the nest. It's so that baby bird can fly on its own. The US dollar getting weaker is the US dollar getting kicked out of the nest, so these countries around the world and their currencies can fly on their own. Goldilocks is stating and showing that mother birds encourage their offspring to leave the nest so that they can nudge forward and move forward on their own. It's time for the world to take flight. Although it takes a little longer time than a week for the dollar to be reduced among nations, the dollar is now taking its rightful place, and so are the currencies around the world. All you have to do, ladies and gentlemen, is be prepared with the facts. We will continue to bring it to you so that this blessing that you have coming to you will come in the right manner and with the right expectations, so that you no longer continue to be disappointed every week, every weekend. Be well, folks. We love you. Ciao.
Hello, beautiful people. This is Freedom Fighter. Thank you for tuning into our channel, Goldilocks Global Banking News. Everybody knows that Goldilocks is the #1 source for the RVGCR. People from around the world tune in to see what Goldilocks is sharing on the RVGCR. Don't miss your chance and get your latest updates every day. So like, share, and subscribe to this channel to get your daily podcast from the Goldilocks articles on the RVGCR. Brought to you by Freedom Fighter.